Hi everyone, I'm Ariel Zeitlin. I'm CTO for GuardianCore, and GuardianCore is a company that is building micro-segmentation solutions that help customers introduce zero trust into their networks. And what I wanted to talk today is uh, sort of our perspective on zero trust. And when I think about zero trust, is my initial thought that it's a well-defined uh, concept with well-defined pillars and how it should be addressed. But I always struggled with is how to apply this from the practitioner perspective, because a lot of organizations have different solutions, have some sort of uh, uh, reduced trust or attempts to reduce their trust in their networks, and what are the practical means that they can do? Where should they spend their time more? Where it's more important to invest their time and effort. And this is why we are here today, and we'll try to address those issues and look at the networks and then zero trust in general from a practitioner perspective, and trying to understand where inside the networks there's potentially too much trust and what it means for the attacker, and how an attacker can go in and leverage those areas that there is too much trust, or sometimes it's sort of a hidden underlying trust that you have in your organization, your networks. And to do that, I'm super excited to welcome a colleague of mine, Ophir Harpaz. Ophir is I would say, very famous security researcher. And if you're not following her on Twitter already, I'll do yourself a favor and start doing it now. And Ophir will help me understand from the attacker point of view where organizations today have too much trust, and how they can reduce and where should they focus. So Ophir, hi, I'm super excited to do it. I think it's our first session together.
Yeah, I think it is actually, and I'm really excited as well. I'm actually familiar with the Zero Trust framework and all the pillars, but I kind of felt as well that I'm curious into how this can be actually applied to real data centers. So I'm really excited to be here, and obviously I love playing the bad guys role.
Okay.
So start.
Okay, cool. So let's dive into it, without further ado. So let's take a general organization, and I think that if we look at all our customers and organizations that we talk to, and kind of use the average sort of model and security stack that they have, I think that if we take an organization that today a lot of people are working from home, so they connect from their devices through a VPN to their data center and their applications inside the data center on the cloud, and they have some sort of authentication that they do with the VPN, like username and password that they enter before they go in and start using those applications. Do you agree that this is like a general sort of environment that we see with a lot of customers?
Yeah, it is a pretty common environment, I would say. So let's go for a second to the work from home part that you mentioned. So in your imaginary company, employees probably connect to the data center through the VPN. So they probably use some sort of authentication to do that, right?
Yeah. So no, what it's surprising how common we see is it's just at the end of the day, it's some sort of a username password that's given to them, and especially when organizations move to work from home quickly, and there's a lot of quick sort of ramp up from the operational team to kind of allow them connect to their organizations. And this is where a lot of them gravitated, just provide a username and a password to each one of them, and they just connect through the VPN to the data center and land inside the data center like they've been using their desktop on-prem.
So actually, Ariel, this one's pretty easy for me to tackle because a username is simply not good enough an identifier for authentication. And in a way, you trust someone just because they know a certain password or a certain string. So for me, that's just not good enough.
Okay, so to help us and our viewers and listeners to follow our conversation, we will use those sticky notes. So I'll try to do that. And as you say, weak credentials is too much trust. And is what a lot of organizations do to tackle this is to improve the the authentication part before they go into the VPN, and instead of you're providing a username and a password, say let's check that it's when you say it's you, it's actually you using some sort of a multi-factor authentication, right? So this is the sort of how to address that. So now we have our users working from home, connecting from their laptops through a VPN, authenticating themselves through a multi-factor authentication. So now we know it's actually them, not someone stole their password. So what's the next? How do you go around that?
So, in my opinion, there's still some trust issues here because even while a user is authenticated using their password, you cannot assume that this specific person is the one accessing your data center. Some attacker might be abusing your user access rights. And this is actually the bread and butter of many attack vectors and threat actors today. The machine may be authenticated, but you as an attacker can use the channel and abuse it to get into the data center itself.
Yeah, I agree. It's actually a big problem. So what we basically say from the trust perspective, the fact that you're an authenticated user, it's we can't completely trust that it's actually you are accessing the data center. Maybe it's an attacker, leveraging your authenticated access to do some
Exactly.
damage, right? So let's say a breached endpoint, someone's on your laptop, while you're authenticated to the VPN, and now he has access to the applications. So I think that this one actually really hard to tackle, right? So what a lot of organizations try to do is to introduce some sort of an EDR solution or antivirus that makes sure that reduces the risk that someone else is on your computer while you're authenticated into the data center. So does that sound like solving all the problems here?
Well, I don't mean to be the pain in the ass here, but any attacker can try to eliminate your EDR or security solution. So, and actually this has happened a few times before. So in that case, we're kind of at the exact place we were just 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, and I agree. I think we have seen our customers, right, when we were introduced, after the breach, and when we look at them and I've seen what happened is that someone took the EDR down. An alert was raised somewhere, but nobody was looking because sometimes just things happen, and it's a very common noise that they have in their SOC, so nobody takes care of it. So this is probably a really hard problem to tackle. What we can try and do is somehow make sure that the connection is only allowed if the EDR is actually running, and there are some technologies that help you do that. But my thought here is that it can be operationally very complex, and probably this is where it's it's not the right point to. This is not the biggest risk problem that you have. So wouldn't you agree that we can go and try to put patch on how attackers are gonna overcome every single protection that we add, but sounds like I can't win this war with you.
Yeah, I agree. I have to admit I agree, and I think we reached a good point where we have sort of a balance between the trust that we give and the operational complexity that is required. So now maybe let's move on to other areas that are maybe more concerning than the machine data center connection.
Yeah, I agree. And so let's assume that you're authenticated to with multi-factor authentication to your VPN, you access your data center, and you even add an EDR to your endpoint, making sure that it's you that actually is making the access. Now, what's the problem with that? What's the next?
So here's the problem, Ariel. By giving a user access to anything you have inside the network, you're giving them too much trust. And this is bad for a couple of reasons. An employee might not have the best intentions, or they can be an insider threat. And even the little trust that we left in the previous part of our conversation might be still leveraged by an attacker. So we did reduce the risk in a way of someone malicious accessing the data center or the VPN in the first place. But if this does happen, then the impact is still quite a kind of huge and must be reduced.
So here, let's assume that we let our users connect to our data center through a VPN, and we don't just give them access to anywhere from this VPN termination point, but we actually make the access very specific for who you are and where you can get, either by configuring the VPN with the identity or using a more modern solutions like zero trust network access, and making sure that whoever is accessing our network is authenticated and only accessing the applications that he should. So what's the next problem?
So I have to say you really did make it quite hard for me as an attacker at this point, but let's think maybe of another attack vector. So there are many entry points to the data center that we did not discuss yet. And attackers can actually get inside the network through the production server, like in the case of SolarWinds, for example, or any internet-facing application or service that are vulnerable. This can be the VPN, this can be a database server, a web server, just to name a few examples. And in this case, you basically trust the server just because it is within your network. But in practice, the attacker can access anything, and lateral movement is made quite easy in this case.
Yeah, that's true. I think that sometimes when and this is we're getting much closer to where this is really what Guardicore's way is all about, is that when you look inside your network and your network is sort of flat, so any server can access anywhere, which is unfortunately what we see with majority of organizations that we talk to, because flat networks is the normal in a lot of organizations, and changing that is really hard with traditional technologies. But what it really means from the trust perspective is your trust is sort of at the size of your segmentation. So if you have all your servers on the same segment, that they all trust each other. Nobody is checking anything when someone tries to connect from server to server. If you break down the servers to a few segments, then the trust is of the side of the segment, right? So I think that the way to deal with unsegmented networks and the way to reduce this trust is to micro-segment your data center, or at least to segment into a few chunks. So if you're an attacker and you're getting access to part of a network in one segment, you would at least will be bound to this specific segment, right? So this is the sort of micro-segmentation. But if I'm taking sort of the step back and try, moving from flat network to micro-segmented network, even with modern technologies like the technologies provided by Guardicore, can be a complex step, right? So if you're an attacker and I'm trying to sort of limit the efforts where I want to do microsegmentation, or not completely microsegmented, but segment some parts of it, what would be the most beneficial for me to focus on so your life as an attacker will be harder?
That's an important question. I would probably focus on the most critical applications in the network. Critical IT infrastructure, like the domain controllers, monitoring services, VPNs, even backup services. And if you reduce the trust in those areas, then even in the case of a breach, you will have quite limited business impact eventually.
Yeah, I agree. This is a great point. So when you deal with segmenting the network and you deal with the operational complexity, focus on the your digital crown jewels, sometimes it's called, like the areas where the most important for your business. Reduce the trust around them, but also focus on where the attacks can come on from. So your VPNs, your users, customers coming from the internet, and so on. So this is exactly that. Okay, so let me take a step back. So here's what we have now. We have a pretty, I think, advanced security model, right? Our users are connecting through either multi-factor authentication with an EDR to the network, where the access to the network is restricted through the identity, either by ZDNA solution or a well-configured VPN access. And we even reduce the risk around the critical ground jewels and the most important assets in our organization by microsegmenting them. I think it's pretty mature trust model, right? Do you agree?
Generally, yes, I agree. But what we need to take into consideration is that sometimes this trust scheme that we just built is broken by an event, and suddenly you find that you need to untrust someone or something, something like a spontaneous block list that you kind of need to apply and apply fast. Such an event can be a network breach, where all of a sudden you distrust infected machines. And again, actually SolarWinds comes to mind when I think about it, but it can also be a certain user that you do not trust anymore. And this can be, once again, a malicious employee or an insider threat within your organization. So I would say that you need to be able to say in a short notice, I do not trust this machine or this user anymore.
Yeah, I think I actually like very much how you define it. So you build a trust model. You probably will never be able to get the complete zero trust. It will be operationally very hard and will require a lot of efforts. And you will always focus on what's important and where the most of the risks are. But you always leave some trust on the table. But the trust model that you build can actually be broken. And I like how you frame this, because someone gets inside your network, goes over all of your protections as inside, and now you need to kind of sort of be able to untrust anything. So it can be by either taking users out of taking access from specific users, or being able to say, hey, this set of assets, this subnet is breached, and I don't trust them anymore, right? Instead of saying this is what I trust and this is my trust model, saying this, I don't explicitly trust this subnet or this few servers or pieces, correct?
So actually quite so, but I have to make it difficult again and say that reality is probably more complex than just limiting a user or even a whole subnet. And what you need is the ability to take back your trust based on more complicated things like certain behaviors or certain properties. For example, modifying a registry key or some process that is running or a file and so on. So these raise a complexity more than quarantining a whole subnet.
Yeah, I agree. So, and actually, when this sort of a I don't trust moments happen is when there's some sort of an incident is happening, and sometimes what identifies what you don't trust is not something simple as a machine name or an IP in the network. It's more of a dynamic state of the machine, right? The incident response gets in and says, okay, I have an attack inside, and this is how uh, an infected machine looks like. Those are IOCs. And what they want to say, don't trust any machine that has those IOCs kind of disconnected. Don't let them access the critical crown jewels and so on. So kind of distrust specific behavior or configuration of a machine, right?
Exactly that.
Yeah, I think this is great. By the way, this is really hard, and the last point, being able to distrust something based on sort of an internal configuration of a machine, but very, very helpful. This is what the incident response team basically want to say at those points of time. Don't trust anything with this registry key, this file, and or accessing this domain in the internet, right? We're Guardicore, we actually help our customers tackle exactly that. But look at all of this. This is a lot of technologies. There's a lot of things that you can do to be able, sort of structurally reduce the trust that you have to your network access inside your network, and also have those capabilities that help you deal when the trust is breached and something is happening. And what would you sort of recommend from knowing our customers, being sort of representing sort of an attacker side, and taking an average organization and say where they should invest based on what they probably have and where they probably have the biggest gaps? How would you pinpoint our listeners to where it's most important to focus on?
So I think we can kind of narrow down our conclusions into three main points. The first one is regarding the initial network access. Have a non-simplistic one into your data center. This can be a VPN with really good identity-based rules or restricted app access, or it can be a ZTNA solution like we mentioned before. The second point is regarding segmentation, of course. You need to verify that your network is well segmented, at least around the most critical assets in your organization. And this is actually where we see most organizations fail today. So this is a really important point. And the last one is concerning what we talked about, the dynamic trust model. You need this capability of untrusting someone or something in your network. And from my experience, this capability is strongest when it is coupled with a set of IOCs, of indicators of compromise. So if I'm under attack and I'm starting to understand how the attacker actually operates inside the network, I want to be able to say that any machine with certain attributes or behaviors I do not trust anymore. Just being able to kind of cross out machines or users completely in a matter of minutes.
So basically, those are the three biggest problems in your opinion, where sort of, if we need to pick up from all of those, where you see customers are mostly being lacking in capabilities and are the most interesting for the attackers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually liked it a lot, and I think that this if we look at the general customer of ours, this is, and they gonna want to approach the zero trust. This is where we see the biggest problems, right? The access to the network, the trust inside the network, and the fact that they cannot really start untrusting someone or something very fast. And if we need to somehow order those, I think that my logic says that you need to build focus on the network first, focus on your critical assets first, secure them, make sure that they are segmented well from all the rest, and then go and build your trust model to the from those core assets to the users. And in fact, just a few days ago, NSA published their zero trust recommendations, and this is exactly how they framed this, right? So start with your critical assets and build a zero trust from the core to the users or to your customers. But I think that the foundational control there is while you're building there, make sure that you're able to address a breach in the trust, or there's a breach in your network, and I think this control on or this problem on the right side is also very, very foundational, and I recommend customers being able to do that really fast. Thank you, Ophir. I think this was really helpful, and thank you for bringing the attacker's point of view and making this sort of a simulation with me. And I hope customers that are looking at this zero trust and look at what they have and where the biggest problems that attackers can exploit are. This was helpful for them to focus on where they should start and what the core technologies they need to focus on. And thank you for that. And thank you. It was great, chatting with you, and just taking a step back, and talk for a few minutes about Guardicore. We in Guardicore are all about zero trust, and especially focused on network segmentation and reducing the access from your users to the data center, and what sometimes, and we kind of mentioned that sometimes the fact that the network are flat and the fact that the user access is not well restricted is because it's really hard operationally. To segment the network today takes a village. You need to change your network, you need to change your applications because you move applications from one segment to another. And this is really, really hard. This is where a lot of teams need to be involved. And not that people don't understand that unsegmented networks are bad, there's too much trust. It's just they're stuck with it's a really hard project to tackle. So this is where Guardicore can really help with mapping your network, mapping how your users connecting to your network, and build those segments and create those micro segments inside your network based on the criticality of the applications or servers that you have there, but most importantly, without any disruption to the operation, without changing the network, without changing the applications, and sort of you can start doing it in production with a very, very small team without any disruption. So I recommend, of course, looking at technology as Guardicore when you look at addressing the zero trust inside your networks. And I hope it was helpful for you. Thank you, Ophir. It was great talking to you. If you don't follow Ophir on Twitter, start doing it right now. It will be great for you to see what she's doing, the research and the stuff that she discovers. Sorry?
Thank you. It was a real pleasure chatting with you.
Cool. Visit our website, check out what we have, and hope you enjoyed this conversation, and looking forward to seeing you in your zero trust journey.